You know Max Blumenthal from The Gray Zone. He's also the author of this book called The Management of Savagery, and which it's always nice when someone tries to, they tried to suppress the opening of that book. And so it's always, he's over the target when you're catching that kind of flack. Max Blumenthal is here with us. Hi, Max. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. So, and now just so people know, Max does not have makeup on. That's as good as that. He looks just like that no matter what. Isn't that amazing?
It's the fountain of youth when you're a shut-in writer who never gets any sunlight or vitamin D. It's like being a monk.
And that's why our skin is white, because we had to be able to get more vitamin D. That's the whole point.
Yeah, I mean, when you self-quarantine me, it's just redundant.
Okay. So I don't know, did you see this? Joe Biden said, "Let me be clear, no one should have to pay for coronavirus testing or treatment." And I said, "But you should go broke if you get sick any other way, right?"
Well, he was pretty upset that Italy had a single-payer system. And, he's opposed to Medicaid for all. He wants to make a few temporary changes. I just hope that, Joe Biden will be there when it's time to take back all of the necessary reforms to keep a modicum of the public alive. And if he is physically there, that he'll actually mentally know he's there.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it kind of amazing that people can't put that together themselves? Like, why is the government going to take care of this illness, but they won't take care of another? If I get pneumonia from the H1N1 and die, then fuck you. But if I get it from coronavirus, they'll pay for it. What's the difference? You think people will put that together throughout this pandemic?
They had better. I mean, I was just looking at the stimulus bill, and on page 728, I didn't read the whole thing, but I was browsing around and some people were talking about this. So I went in and found it. And on page 728, there's $500 million in there for the CDC to enhance surveillance and form new, methods of new surveillance methods to keep track on COVID victims, and basically to monitor the American public, using this crisis to continue to monitor the American public. We heard Bill Gates, who always is vying with Jeff Bezos to be the richest man in the world. I don't know if he's first or second right now, who's been preparing for pandemics like this, who just stepped down from the board of Microsoft and Berkshire Hathaway to totally focus on pandemics, calling for a national tracking system of Americans. And there is some evidence that the vaccine that he's proposing will contain some kind of surveillance device to mark whether people have been vaccinated or not. But the point is that they're proposing all of these measures, which would be unnecessary if we actually had an effective national healthcare system, if these tests were in place, if there was a public health infrastructure, and if there were even just mechanisms in place to contain the virus, or there was a political leadership capable of taking it seriously. Instead, they're just exploiting it to increase and ratchet up the panopticon that we're living in. And Joe Biden, that's piecemeal. Wow, we'll make some tests free. Where are the tests anyway?
Right. Well, I know that after Joe Biden at the debate derided Italy's Medicare for all healthcare system, the very next day, the government flew tests from Italy, I think 100,000 tests from Italy to the United States. So yeah, there you go, Joe. There's your, the fact that Bernie wasn't able to clobber him in the middle of a pandemic for being against Medicare for all. What does that say to you?
I mean, Biden has been spreading misinformation that actually puts people's lives in danger, telling them that if you don't have symptoms, or at least his campaign has, I don't think he knows what Twitter is, but on Twitter, they've been telling people, go to the polls.
Yes.
If you don't have symptoms, it takes sometimes 2 weeks for the symptoms to even show themselves. Many young people may have COVID-19 and be able to spread it. So aside from the insanity of telling people to go to the polls and, rub your hands all over some grubby ass screen, they're telling people that they're lying about what the virus is. And yeah, you're right. I mean, Bernie, that was his one chance to really knock Biden off his block. It's not like he's debating someone with a silver tongue. And Biden led the attack throughout the debate. And then when he basically red baited Bernie and painted him as, some kind of as like a crypto Stalinist, Bernie just sat there and took it defensively. The whole debate also for Bernie was about the Senate. It's almost as if Biden was not VP, as if they didn't preside over this gigantic giveaway in the form of the ACA to the healthcare industry, which is now funding him. He couldn't touch Biden as VP. He couldn't talk about the Obama administration because Bernie's afraid to talk about the titanic failure of the 8 years of Obama, which set the stage for Trump and this crisis. And of course, the financial giveaway, the bailout, which we've seen sort of replicated and put on steroids with this latest stimulus package that 100% of Democrats voted for.
So, Max, isn't that in a sense? So the reason why you're 100% correct, the reason why we're going through this horrible stimulus, which is the biggest screwing that America's ever gotten. It's the biggest transfer of wealth in the history of the entire world. It's happening right now, and progressives are voting for it.
Yeah.
Progressives are voting for it right now. It's the biggest screwing ever, and they're voting for it. And so that's why let's get to that right now. Okay.
Yeah.
So here is, it seems I seem to feel like a lone wolf. I'm the only one who was screaming that Bernie should have been putting a hold on the bill and telling people what was in it and saying that we should split it up. Do you agree? So I was thinking he should split that. He should put a hold on it. They should have started last Thursday, the Thursday before, when they knew this bill was coming. They should have started working. He should have started trying to get allies to put a hold on this and tell people what was in it and say, hey, I'm going to put a hold until you split the bill up, one for corporate funding and one for people funding. And so now people will know what's in it, and then we can have a real debate. But right now they're not. And so what they did was they put those two things together. So now Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders come out and say our hands were tied, and then they start touting all the good things that are in the bill. So, For instance, let me just play this real quick. Here's Ilhan Omar. She was on Democracy Now! And tell me if this makes any sense to you, okay? All right. Oh, wait.
I think this crisis and this pandemic really lays bare the kind of inequalities that have existed for far too long in our country. And the conversations we're having right now as we put forth our third relief package shows us that there is often a prioritization of corporate interests and often not a prioritization of the interest of the people.
So she just said that this bill is, again, another representation of how we often put the priorities and interests of corporations over the interests of the people. So that's what this bill is. It's putting the interests of corporations over the people. And what's the next thing she says?
So today I plan on voting for this bill.
Now,
ooh, man.
This is what the progressives are doing. I got an email yesterday from Bernie Sanders touting all the great things that they fought for and got in the bill. So now people who are turning to their progressive leaders are going, well, there's a lot of good shit in this bill, I guess. So
yeah, it's kind of like you robbing my house would deprive me of much needed things and jewelry of sentimental value and expose my family to harm. And so at the end of the day, here are the keys to my house, and we'll cut a deal where you don't harm some members of my family. That's kind of what it appears to be like.
Well, here's let me just show you one more. So here she goes on and says this.
The one thing that I am exceptionally excited about is the fact that there is a deferment for student debt so that people can get relief for a few months in regards to that.
Yeah.
So that's a deferment. That's not. So again, not even pennies or crumbs to people with student loans, but trillions to the richest 1,000 people in the country. And we have are progressive leaders going around touting it and then saying they're going to vote for it. Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, I mean, you have Boeing, which has planes, dropping out of the sky like hail in Nebraska. The 737 MAX doesn't fly. It was in complete crisis. They've been begging for federal money and lobbying for federal money for years. They finally got one of their lobbyists as the defense secretary. And so 17 billion is tucked into the stimulus under the cover of urgent national security priorities. It's just Boeing money. It's earmarked for Boeing. Then, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she is right. She said on Twitter, the cruise industry is being bailed out, even though they don't register in the United States specifically to avoid paying taxes in the United States. They also have de facto slave labor, indentured servants on board, and they don't want to abide by any labor laws. They got bailed out. So, and AOC delivers this, great performance on the House floor that everyone's sharing on Twitter, slay queen. She's so great. She voted for it. Bernie too. He performed very well for the cameras, but it was just grandstanding at the end of the day. It's to satisfy their progressive base on Twitter to have these little performances clipped out by people who think they're heroes, that they actually accomplished something substantial, but they still voted for a titanic. It's not a corporate bailout. It's the reinforcement of corporate control over our lives for at least another generation. And the most hated man in Washington is a Republican congressman who lives in a house that he built by himself, a completely environmentally sustainable house that he built by himself on a hilltop in Kentucky, who is a diehard libertarian named Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie managed to unite Donald Trump and the Democrats in hatred of him because he actually tried to hold up this bill in order to force every single member to record a vote according to the Constitution. Everybody hates him in Washington. Max Rose, this sort of centrist neocon Democrat from Staten Island, called him un-American for doing it. And the Democrats are all saying, and the Republicans, if you make us come in to actually vote and record our votes for this gigantic corporate giveaway, you are going to get people killed and we're all going to die because of that. But at the same time, they're still making everyone, all the Amazon warehouse workers, all the delivery drivers, people still working in restaurants, the postman, they all still have to go to work. So why do members of Congress not have to go and vote on this bill? So Thomas Massie actually wound up becoming the most hated man in Washington for holding up this titanic corporate giveaway. It doesn't make sense to me.
So, can you just speak to why? So, I'm going to show you this. I played this on the show yesterday. I want to show it again, which was exactly what you're talking about. So, AOC went on the floor and she gave this speech. So, I got this from David Dole's show.
Fighting for the best interests of people. Check this out.
What did the Senate majority fight for? One of the largest corporate bailouts with as few strings as possible in American history. Shameful. The greed of that fight is wrong for crumbs, for our families. And the option that we have is to either let them suffer with nothing or to allow this greed and billions of dollars, which will be leveraged into trillions of dollars, to contribute to the largest income inequality gap in our future. There should be shame about what was fought for in this bill and the choices that we have to make.
Okay, so what do you say to that, Max?
Well, she said everything I just said. She's correct, but I mean, she voted for it.
That's what I don't understand. Why are they?
Why not abstain?
Why not make? Because Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer negotiated this bill with Mitch McConnell, and so why wouldn't you come out and criticize your leadership to say, what's the point of taking over the House if we have to do this horrible bill? What's the point of having power whatsoever? Well, that just goes to show you when they voted for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, they were literally voting for Mitch McConnell as
AOC
Speaker.
AOC voted for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker.
And so she can't come out and criticize Nancy Pelosi doing this bill because that's who they should be criticizing, right?
Yeah, and they got a Vanity Fair cover with Nancy Pelosi, and
I mean, I'm fucking serious, Max. This
trillions of dollars.
This is crazy. Like what they're supposed to be doing. Ilhan Omar, AOC, Rashid Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, Tulsi Gabbard, Ro Khanna. They're all supposed to be coming out a week ago, Thursday, not last Thursday, a week ago, united with Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and saying to the people, what the fuck is happening right now? And if you are against, corporate control of our country, you better get against this right now. Instead, Bernie gives a fake speech that didn't matter, and now AOC gives that speech that also, and then they all vote for it.
Yeah, you know what this is? This is TARP combined with the Patriot Act. So when TARP was being voted on, you had this somewhat inspiring alliance of Tea Party Republicans and Libertarian Republicans and lefty Democrats who united against it. And they said that, the corporations are being bailed out and the people are being sold out. We shouldn't have to pay for these white collar criminals to continue to perpetuate crimes against us. And, the whole thing led to Occupy, which was the rational response. In this case, it's a lot like the Patriot Act in that you have a traumatized, shell-shocked public, traumatized lawmakers, and they're being basically whipped into voting for this out of just that sense of trauma, the fear of their own mortality and many people dying. They're being told everyone's going to die unless you vote for this. Liz Cheney, the daughter of Dick Cheney.
Max, this is the opposite of fucking leadership.
Liz Cheney said,
why I didn't vote for my
there
crazy.
Can be no second guessing. All we can do is unite together and praise the greatest country on earth. And it's Liz Cheney who's really, along with Pelosi, kind of driving the narrative here. And I swear they're going to regret this. They're going to regret this because whenever people can get back into the streets, you're going to see Occupy on steroids. People are being betrayed massively right now. Workers are being betrayed.
So again, I just want to get this straight because no one else is reporting it the way we're reporting it here at this show. I turn on other progressive shows and they're all saying there's heroes in this, and the heroes are AOC, Ilhan Omar, and Bernie Sanders. Are there any heroes in this, Max?
Well, it really shows, kind of the sensibility of self-styled progressives, which they value rhetoric over concrete action. It's why so many people were duped by Obama in 2008, because he'd given a lot of really good speeches. He gave a speech against the war, but what had he actually done? Barack Obama actually in practice supported welfare reform. He basically went along with the mainstream corporate Democrats in the Illinois State Senate. So no one wanted to look at that. And that's what they're getting here. The people are sitting at home and they're feasting on red meat rhetoric from AOC, but they're not looking at what actions she specifically took. So I would like to hear her explain herself, but they're just basically saying we had to do this or we would have been treated like Thomas Massey. And Thomas Massey was the sacrificial lamb. He was crucified. They made an example of him in order to intimidate other legislators against doing this. I thought Tulsi Gabbard, what she did on impeachment, abstaining, was brave. And it was like a way of poking the eye of the national security state and the whole phony show that the Democrats had been running, which is completely forgotten now, now that we're actually dealing with serious business and the real failures of Trump. But none of them even had the heart to abstain because they fear for their careers. And I'm telling you, maybe a year from now, I don't know when this plague is going to be over, how it's going to wind up. They're going to regret the actions they took. Because
you really think they're going to regret it, Max? Because no one, even the progressive media today is carrying water for them right now.
I guess you make a point. You make a good point there.
Max, now I'm the only one saying the truth on a show. Other people have written it and tweeted it. But on a show, I'm the only one, even in progressive media, who's pointing out that Bernie's speech for the unemployment benefits was, as Dave Dayen used his term, is kabuki theater, meaning that thing would have passed anyway. Bernie didn't get that on. That wasn't even his bill. That was written by Michael Bennett. So that didn't even. So and they're saying that Bernie got that in when it would have gotten in without him, and that was just theater, right?
Yeah, and maybe I'm missing something. I probably haven't been following the details as closely as you, but there was a lot of celebration among the Democrats about oversight mechanisms and transparency, and Trump just repealed all of that.
This was on Democracy Now! And they asked Ilhan Omar about oversight, and now, of course she's now concerned. And I'm like, there's no just like there was no oversight of TARP. They put 5 people in charge of $4.2 trillion. 5 people are going to track $4.2 trillion.
Yeah, look at
and by the way, only after the fact, because the Treasury Department and the Fed gets to give that money out immediately, and then it's only after the fact that you can now try to account for it. But or audit it. It's all, and then they're all voting for it, and I'm the only one screaming about this. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, a few weeks ago, Nancy Pelosi was saying Donald Trump is being controlled by Russia. They were trying to impeach him. They were saying he was the worst criminal on earth. And now they've basically given Donald Trump a slush fund to do whatever he wants. Steve Mnuchin just got $486 billion to dole out as he pleases. Steve Mnuchin, the foreclosure king from the vampire squid of Goldman Sachs. He just got that. Look at that guy. I trust any used car salesman more than that guy.
So why do you think, first, I want to ask you 2 things. Well, let me just give you, this is a quote by Huey Long. He says, corrupted by wealth and power, your government is like a restaurant with only one dish. They've got a set of Republican waiters on one side and a set of Democratic waiters on the other side. But no matter which set of waiters brings you the dish, the legislative grub is all prepared in the same Wall Street kitchen. That's what's happening here, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
they won't even fucking vote against it and let it pass anyway. Like, it passed 96-0 in the Senate. They wouldn't even vote against it. Why couldn't they just at least vote against it so people would ask them, why did you vote against it? And then they could tell people. But right now it looks like it's the super popular, cool thing to do because everybody's voting for it.
And, most of them didn't even show up. It was just kind of a voice vote. I mean, it wasn't even a real vote.
I mean, Max, what in the fuck is going on? And no one will tell the truth about what's going on right now. Have you seen anyone else tell the truth about what's actually happening right now?
I was spending all day trying to figure this out and why Thomas Massie was so hated. And I wasn't able to find anything in progressive media. I turned to the Ron Paul Report, this libertarian show, because they were interviewing Massie to let him actually explain why he did what he did. And while I totally disagree with him and think it's completely irresponsible to call coronavirus a distraction, and I totally disagree that people should be, going into restaurants right now, that whole side of it, is just mishigas to me. But Massie's, was very clear about why he opposed it, and he wasn't afraid to stand alone. It's just complete cowardice is what we're witnessing. And,
it is cowardice.
On opposing Trump's foreign policy, AOC, she's signed on to a few good things, but she really hasn't been there very much. We saw Ilhan Omar stand up against the Venezuela coup, but, on so many issues right now, for example, with Trump tightening sanctions on Iran. I mean, they're openly attempting to kill people abroad. Mike Pompeo is deriving libidinal pleasure from starving Iranians and Venezuelans. And we scarcely hear any criticism of Mike Pompeo in public. I don't think Bernie has criticized him in a debate or on the trail. So, there's a lot of fear out there among the Democrats. And at the same time, we can't be in the streets.
Right.
And what does that mean? It means new mechanisms of control are going to enter our lives, and they're not going to go away at the end of this. It's very much like the Patriot Act, which was also reauthorized by all of the Democrats. And I think the squad voted for the reauthorization of the Patriot Act. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't know. I can't correct you one way or another.
I'm going to pull up a tweet about that, but
Okay, so it's very disheartening. If the one thing that the progressives are supposed to be able to do is criticize their leaders when they're out of line, as Bernie has said over and over, my followers should, or the people who follow me should hold my feet to the fire when I'm, and no one will do that. No one will fucking do that. And then all I do is point out a goddamn obvious thing that's obvious. And they act like I'm taking away their drugs, and they're a bunch of drug addicts. Like, give me that fucking, are you fucking crazy?
Yeah. Sorry.
Let me just
November 2019. Nancy Pelosi snuck a reauthorization of the Patriot Act, extending it into bill on border wall funding, and many members of the Progressive Caucus voted for it. Here's what Bobby Rush, who I think is in the Progressive Caucus, Democratic rep from Illinois, had to say. Although I do have serious concerns with reauthorizing Section 215, which is the Patriot Act, we must focus on the bigger picture here. And he had actually signed a letter that October, a month before, that was co-authored by Rashida Tlaib and Earl Blumenauer, that read, "We will not support any legislation that extends Section 215's sunset date if it fails to contain robust reforms that protect innocent people from unjust surveillance." So he went ahead and voted for it anyway. And the reform that they got was that political candidates could not be monitored by the NSA or the FBI. But, people like Carter Page, who are attached to political campaigns, still can. So private citizens, or me and you. And by the way, Amazon's Alexa has a new feature which allows you to ask if you have coronavirus, and then it asks you various follow-up questions about your medical history and relays it to who knows where. So this is very much like a Patriot Act moment without Russ Feingold.
So let me just play. I do have one more clip here from that Democracy Now! Interview with Ilhan Omar. So let me just see what it is. I think it is about the oversight. Let me see.
Been very critical of the $500 billion, what some people are calling a corporate slush fund, that it has very little oversight, though it was strengthened somewhat in this latest bill. Others said, why wasn't it just sliced out of the $2 trillion package? That you have the president saying he'll be the oversight on what corporations are bailed out. How do you feel that there are some now protections and safeguards in this bill that you're voting on today about who gets this?
And I don't know about, I'm going to call into question the framing of this question.
Yeah.
That's a bullshit framing. And what is she doing? What is going on over there? Go ahead, Max.
No, I wonder that every day about Democracy Now! But she's just teeing it up for Ilhan Omar to make it look like she was heroic. What do you think about the fact that that bill is actually way better than we thought? I mean, come on.
That's mental what's happening. It's mental what's going on all over the progressive news sphere right now. But that is especially mental, right?
She's just teeing it up, and it's false. The framing is false.
There's no oversight. It's not much better. It's not better. It's non-existent. There is no oversight.
The oversight is going to be over us, as I mentioned. $500 million for new surveillance mechanisms to surveil people based on, for example, their cell phones will be able to be used to track their movement. And I've seen private surveillance companies promote on social media new methods for tracking people. I just don't see any oversight of Donald Trump and foreclosure king Steve Mnuchin. Virtually everyone, every cabinet secretary and people around them are corporate lobbyists. Alex Azar from the Health and Human Services Secretary was a big pharma lobbyist. How are you going to put oversight on those people? They're just there for a moment like this to give our money to their friends. And Amy Goodman is teeing it up as though, there were some negotiations there and the Democrats got what they wanted out of Donald Trump. And how do you feel about that?
I mean, so let's watch her. Again, nobody can tell. Nobody knows why she's doing this. No one knows why Amy Goodman is doing this, why her show has become a Russiagate CIA talking point haven. No one understands what's going on. Certainly not Aaron Mate, who I see tweeting about the horribleness of what's happening at Democracy Now! Almost on a daily basis. That was gross, what you just saw. That is unbelievable. The progressive left media is now running propaganda for the corporate takeover of America. That's what you just saw right there from Amy Goodman. Now, let's watch what Ilhan Omar says.
Well, first of all, nobody trusts Trump and his administration to have oversight over anything.
So then why did you guys just give him complete control to spend $4.2 trillion at his discretion? Okay, here we go.
Nobody trusts him, so let's trust him.
Let alone this kind of corporate welfare. And we know in previous bailouts, money has been misused, and it took years to be able to regulate it and make sure that it was going into the hands of the right people. And so there are some protections in place, and I look forward to what the follow-ups are going to be as we strengthen.
They have no idea. They have no idea. I look forward to what kind of oversight we're going to have. We don't have any. We might have some. I look forward to it. I voted for this. I don't know if I told you that. I voted for all this. I didn't try to stop it. We didn't come up with a plan. We didn't coalesce with other people. We didn't reach out to senators. We didn't go to the people or the press or anybody. We just fucking voted for it, and then we came on here to justify it. And
yeah,
the progressive... Go ahead.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot, actually, of the Oslo Accords, of the PLO, the Palestinian Authority, negotiating with apartheid Israel, basically negotiating away the Palestinian struggle, and with no final status agreement, no final agreement on borders, no map. They had no idea what the final map would look like. And Israel, which has, a nuclear armed military against stateless indigenous people, proceeds to use the negotiations and the peace process, negotiating again and again, holding meeting after meeting, an international summit with the U.S., which is its guarantor, its patron, its benefactor, as the supposedly honest broker, using those negotiations to put new facts on the ground in the form of settlements, in the form of walls, new mechanisms of control. And that's what the Trump administration is going to do, because Ilhan Omar is saying, well, I look forward to future negotiations, I look forward to seeing what we'll do in the future. In the future, in a few months, Trump's white-collar cronies and lobbyists who control the secretary of, who are the secretaries of, or every cabinet secretary virtually, will have already enriched their buddies with our money. And I don't know how long we're going to be under self-quarantine, but it's going to be pretty difficult to get out in the streets for a while. So that's very depressing. I don't have much else to say, but you deserve a lot of credit for actually bringing this up. Like you said, I haven't seen anyone in progressive media actually ask. And I mean, I'm not watching it as much as for my own mental sanity as you are. I haven't seen them actually ask why this was unanimous, why it was unanimously agreed upon.
Well, people will say this. I've had people say this to me. First, they say, well, what was Bernie supposed to do, Jimmy? What was he supposed to do? And I tell them very easily, dumb fucking guy like me, ex-bricklayer who smokes pot when he gets up in the morning, nightclub comedian, entertains drunks for his living. I fucking know what he should have done. He should have started a week ago Thursday, not last Thursday, a week ago Thursday, started screaming about it and making them break up the bill into two separate bills. That's what, and said, I'm going to put a hold on this until you do it. And so then everybody in the country would know what the fuck is going on right now. Because right now, nobody knows what's going on. And especially if they turn on progressive media, they're being told that the progressives got shit for them in this bill when they did not. They got fucking pennies, crumbs at best, which is what AOC said. That's not my words. That's AOC. They got crumbs. I'm agreeing with them, and then they go and vote for it. And nobody is pointing out this unbelievable contradiction. And so when people say, hey, what was Bernie supposed to do? He's just one guy. And they would have slammed him for it. So I guess you can't do the right thing if the optics will be bad at some point. So what he should have done, and you know it, and he should have made sure they split up that bill. He should have started reaching out to Elizabeth Warren and anybody else on the right who was against this. Like, he should have then gotten people in the House. The fucking squad should have got together. They all should have had a united front and demanded that Nancy Pelosi fucking negotiate a better deal and not put this through, because this is going to screw Americans forever. And they said, well, we have to do this for a short-term gain, and we're going to make everyone believe that they got something out of it. And then Bernie's going to go give a speech, and everybody's going to think that the unemployment got put in there because of Bernie's speech, because all the progressive media is going to pretend that that's what happened, even though that's not what happened, because nobody has the fucking courage to tell the truth about the corporate giveaway that's happening right now with the endorsement of the progressive movement. They are signing on and voting for it when they should be screaming like I'm fucking screaming right now to stop it.
I can't follow that act with anything more powerful. I can't do anything but agree completely. And I think ultimately they're going to regret this, but the record will probably be wiped clean. If there is some kind of general strike, if there is some kind of movement, street movement where people actually start asserting themselves, not just as, voters in a horse race between two corporate candidates, but asserting themselves as workers, using that power, there'll be a bandwagon effect in progressive media. Progressive media will jump on it like they jumped on Occupy, but they weren't there. Many of them weren't there at this moment. You mentioned David Dayen. He actually said a lot of what you've been saying. This is someone who is really one of the leading analysts and journalists on these kinds of stimulus bills. His piece in American Prospect really laid it out, and he said this isn't really just like a $2.2 trillion stimulus. It'll ultimately amount to $5 trillion.
Yes.
And $5 trillion of just endless money being printed by the Fed with very little product to back it up. Will that lead to inflation? What's that going to do to the dollar? It's going to wreck the economy.
So just so people know exactly what's happening, because no one will put it in this simple of terms. What's happening is right now, nobody has any money because the economy has collapsed, right? So what the government is going to do is come take $5 trillion and give it to the richest 1,000 people in the country or so. And then when all the prices of everything is suppressed because nobody has any money and all the businesses are closed and failed and nobody's got those, they're going to give $5 trillion to the already richest 1,000 people and corporations in the country. And they're going to buy everything while nobody else has any fucking money, further consolidating so like all your chains, all your neighborhood restaurant, all that shit's going to get fucking bought up by corporations.
Yep. Amazon will be the leading buyer. And
yes.
No company's doing better now that everyone's stuck at home than Amazon. I mean, they'll deliver your groceries. They're telling you with Alexa if you have coronavirus and surveilling you in the process. I mean, if I'm Jeff Bezos, I want this to go on as long as possible.
And they're giving this away. They're doing this. The progressives are signing on to it. They're not even voting against it. They're signing on to this. This is nuts that they're signing on to it, and they're not telling people in the language I just used what's in it. What they're actually doing is the exact opposite. They're telling people all the great shit that's in this bill that they got, and other progressive media are saying which one of these progressives are heroes. There's no fucking heroes in this.
Yeah,
There's
what they're doing...
Go ahead.
What they're doing is they're suppressing dissent.
Yes!
They're sweetening the deal for Donald Trump. And that's what the $1,200 checks are for so many desperate people who are living paycheck to paycheck. The question is, are you even going to see the check between now and June? And what will this country even look like in June? Right? I'm not going to see it. I mean, I'm lucky because, I'm self-employed. I work at home. I don't have to go out and I don't have to take the same amount of risks as many workers do. But you get $1,200. You're told you get $1,200, and that suppresses the tidal wave of dissent that we should be seeing right now. And you're told on Democracy Now! By Ilhan Omar that there are checks on Donald Trump, that there's going to be transparency, and she's looking forward to more. That suppresses dissent. And that's what really upsets me here.
So there's already so the oversight, it's like you were mentioning, I just got a text from Aaron, and Trump's first move after signing the coronavirus relief bill, undercutting a key provision of Congress's oversight. His signing statement is rankling some rank-and-file Democrats already. So he already did this. Trump's signing statement on coronavirus says he'll override a provision requiring the newly created Inspector General to report to Congress anytime agencies refuse to give him or her requested information.
Yeah. Why did they trust Vladimir Putin?
Right?
Why did the Democrats trust Russia so much? Because isn't it Russia than Putin that's making Trump do all of this?
So, Max,
and then,
do you think, Max, that this is going to be, I'm just hoping, fingers crossed, it should, if logic plays a role here, that this should be the great unmasking of not only the political, but the progressive political class right now, too. That they're fucking voting for this when people in a couple of months are going to realize how fucked they are because of this. And they didn't get anything. They didn't get a UBI. They didn't get fucking Medicare for all. They could have held out for anything right now. Those cocksuckers want $4.2 trillion. They would have given anything for that $4.2 trillion, and they demanded nothing for it. And now people are going to fucking bad faith attack this show for telling the fucking truth while the world is given away to the 1,000 richest people in the country.
There's so many levels of unmasking here, and it's not just the, progressive political class, which is marginalized within the Democratic Party by design. They don't really have much leverage. The Progressive Caucus has very little leverage. The Squad has less leverage even within the Progressive Caucus, and they chose to abandon their whatever leverage they had by voting for this. But we're also seeing an unmasking of media again and again and again. It's the most hated institution in the U.S. and, rightfully so if you're talking about the corporate media. Donald Trump, of course, deserves the lion's share of the blame for basically lying about the severity of coronavirus. Just getting up there and lying every day on Fox News and having his minions, everyone except Tucker Carlson, lied about it. They just got rid of Trish Regan, who is his ultimate sycophant because she wouldn't stop lying about the severity of coronavirus. They cost lives. I believe whatever ham-handed measures China took in the beginning when the virus allegedly broke out in Wuhan, they bought us time with the aggressive measures they took. My point is, it wasn't just Donald Trump who was downplaying it, although he is the person who deserves most of the blame. It was the whole media, and they weren't conveying the severity of it. And in mid-January, Nancy Pelosi was ranting about how Russia controlled the government. No one in Congress was talking about this. It wasn't being taken seriously. And if anything, what the media did, I saw again and again, was attack China for being too aggressive and for putting Wuhan on quarantine. And now Trump is proposing, it's classic Trump idiocy. He's proposing putting the tri-state area, New York, Connecticut, and Jersey on quarantine. New York, and we knew it weeks ago. We knew New York was going to go full Wuhan and get everyone in check. But what Trump has done, the stupidity of it, is by tweeting about it, everybody in New York is now going to leave until he imposes it. So he telegraphed his punch. He's going to provoke a mass exodus from the tri-state area. Then maybe they'll do it. But this is what China was being attacked for throughout the months of June and February by the whole corporate media, by the liberal media, by the right of center media. And Fox News was lying about it as well. So it's the crisis, and the blame for the crisis needs to be spread across the entire political sphere. It's not just, we can't just blame it on Trump, although he deserves the most blame.
Yeah, I try to exert pressure on the politicians I'm supposed to have the most influence over.
Yeah. So who would that be?
That would be no one now. I have influence over no one. So, that's why Chomsky is the most critical of the United States, because he says, you have to first clean up your own house before you try to clean up someone else's. And I'm going to try to criticize the government I can actually have an influence on, even though he doesn't have any influence on them. hey, this is the part where I tell you where our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then I would tell you to go join our premium, but nobody has a fucking job. So why don't you just enjoy the video?